let Lauren, Masha, and I, along with others on our team, welcome each of you to our presentation today. We are thrilled to represent Pinnacle in the DC and in the National Capital Region, as well as the broader Mid-Atlantic area. We are at Pinnacle, a rapidly growing institution with a heart to serve. I wanted to give a bit of information, so I would ask really, first up, who are we? We are a 22-year-old bank. We are founder-led, which permeates every aspect of who we are at Pinnacle. It is very unique, and I mention it today because it is very similar to many of you on the phone today. We are traded on the NASDAQ, and as such, we are a rapidly growing bank, ending our most recent quarter at more than $38 billion of assets. We are headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee, and we are present in large urban markets where we are geographically and industry focused. We are strong and financially stable. We have a strong liquidity profile, which means we are able to support you with your financings. And we are well regarded by our stakeholders, by our shareholders, as well as our investors. Our founders, who continue to lead our organization, deliberately, intentionally, and purposefully designed our structure to be different. We are, in fact, the exact opposite of the large bank experience. By intention, we are unburdened by bureaucracy and by layers of management. Our model is beautifully simple and highly effective, rewarding both banker as well as client and shareholder. Our model is simply this. First off, we try to create a best place to work environment. Again, I mention this because it is a commonality with many in our government contracting environment. By creating an absolutely terrific place to work every single day, we are able to attract and retain highly seasoned and successful bankers. Those bankers are unburdened by bureaucracy. Therefore, they are free to do what it is they do, which is create relationships, and they serve their clients with both heart and expertise. They, in turn, by doing so, create value for you, our clients, as well as for our bank and each of us as shareholders, thereby driving value for the entirety of the relationship. This model, again, is beautifully simple, but has delivered great results for years and years and years for Pinnacle. We couldn't be more excited about sharing that with you, and I've asked Masha Laughlin to share further a little bit on Pinnacle's unique approach. Masha.
Thank you, Caroline. All that you mentioned so far definitely translates in a cohesive set of values that we live by and how we approach the market. To me, it's not just an intellectual concept or abstract ideas. Values truly guide us at Pinnacle to deliver our products and services in the most consistent and ethical way. The values that are important to us are also important to the government contracting community overall. In my 15 years of lending to contractors, I've seen how such values as integrity and partnership permeate government contracting industry. And I feel very much at home working for a company that believes in creating winning partnerships. And if COVID taught us anything, it is to invest in relationships in good times and in bad. They make us stronger together and more resilient. Our clients can count on us to provide honest feedback and stay true to the value of integrity, no matter what the circumstances might be. Those who have worked with us in the past know that we can get things done for our clients. This firm is driven by values of unwavering discipline, fueled by the desire to achieve superior results. It will not come as a surprise that we've been getting term sheets out to our clients within just a few days of receiving financials, and recently as quickly as 48 hours. Pinnacle has been recognized the best place to work, best place for women and working parents, important for me. The value of balance drives those recognitions for sure. It might sound like we're perfect. Let me assure you we're not, but we also don't believe in empty promises. And I frankly don't know anyone else in the market who cares as much as this team does. Values matter to us, and they matter to you as well. Our firm is wonderfully different from others in so many different ways. And Lauren, I will turn it over to you for a quick summary of what makes us unique. I think we're already on that slide.
Thanks, Masha. So Carolyne, shared a bit about who Pinnacle is, and Masha did a great job walking through the values of the organization. And if you're like me, you might be thinking, put it more simply, what can I expect when I work with Pinnacle and your team? And really what you can expect is experienced professionals who know the industry and are really empowered to make decisions quickly and thoughtfully. We answer the phone when you call, and I know this might sound, you're probably thinking, isn't that a given? Is that a little trite to say? But it's truly a cornerstone of who we are as an organization. We just feel that in order for us to provide distinctive service, we have to be extremely responsive to our clients. And I know you all probably feel that same way, since it's imperative for you to be responsive to your own clients. Local decision-making authority allows us to be so responsive. And like Masha mentioned, that's allowed us to issue multiple term sheets, within just a couple of days turnaround time. Another cornerstone is really, I think, kind of leading all up to who we are and what our values are, is we want to be professionals that provide effective advice. And that's exactly why we've partnered with Red Team today. So I will pass it back to Carolyne Pelton, and she can kick us off on the webinar. Thank you. Thanks, Lauren and Masha. We took a few minutes really to share our story here at Pinnacle, really because I think commercial banking is about a couple of things in general, and one of those is the reduction of risk. I truly believe that Pinnacle's approach, by being very different from the traditional banking experience, lowers risk for our clients. It lowers risk around your financing. Therefore, it lowers risk around liquidity concerns. From that standpoint, you can expect further that we are increasing the confidence that you have around the financing structure for your individual company or for individual clients, for our CPAs and attorneys and others on the phone. Reducing risk and increasing certainty are two very good aspects of what you can expect from Pinnacle going forward. We want to mention those, and again, part of what we do is the reduction of risk through effective advice and creative insights. And when I think of those concepts, I think of the Red Team. And I couldn't be more thrilled to really carry off our first webinar here at Pinnacle with the Red Team. Jeff Shen and Joe Salgado have been partners to those of us on the phone for many years. We have watched them successfully guide our clients in a number of transactions and situations, and we're thrilled to have them share their thoughts around 2022 and what each of us should expect in the federal government contracting world. Again, Q&A will follow their session, and we will provide a recordation of today's content. Jeff and Joe, thank you for joining, and I pass to you.
Thank you, Carolyne. I appreciate the warm introduction, and really just want to thank the entire Pinnacle team for this opportunity to be the first partner, I guess, to co-host an event with the Pinnacle organization. So it's fantastic, and I want to thank you for this opportunity. I am joined here with Joe Salgado, who runs our overall capture practice here at Red Team Consulting. And today, over the next 40 minutes, we're going to be talking about projections for federal procurement in 2022. And I'm so happy it says projections and not predictions, because if it actually said predictions, I wouldn't be here. We'd both be retired somewhere to predict the federal market. But I would say we're pretty good at projecting what the market looks like, especially in the federal sector. So we're going to walk through a couple of introductory slides, and then we're going to dive deeply into a lot of different things that we feel like would be helpful for you if you are in the federal market. So for those who are not familiar with Red Team Consulting, we are a strategic growth consultancy that's in business to help other companies win and scale in the government market. A lot of what we do is in the federal market, but some also is within state and local as well. As you can see, we provide a wide array of services to help our companies in government contracting. And so it's more than just these services that you see in front of you. We're really in business to help our clients beat their largest competitors, diversify their customer portfolio, and attain their financial targets, whether that might be to grow and eventually sell your company, acquire other companies, or simply just diversify your business portfolio. If you are interested to learn more about Red Team Consulting, feel free to contact Joe or myself after the presentation is complete. And for those who don't follow us yet on LinkedIn or Twitter, I do encourage you to follow us. We're very, very active on social media. We cover everything from the legislative and policy updates down to procurement updates to individual opportunities and just lots of other fun stuff that we feel like our clients and partners would be interested in. So I do encourage you to follow us, and please also follow Joe and myself also on LinkedIn. We do have one confirmed upcoming event. We are hosting a workshop on business development and client intelligence. If you're interested in that class, our esteemed colleague, Tris Carpenter, will be leading that class at the end of March. Okay, so in the next, 35 or 40 minutes, we're going to be covering quite a bit on federal budget, small business regulations, but really primarily on large procurements that might be of interest to many of you. And then Joe's also going to talk about some of the other big contracts that we're tracking that you might be interested in. So I normally talk really, really fast. I'm going to talk even faster just because we have so much information that we're going to cover. And so if you have questions, if I skip over something, please submit a question. Just because, Joe and I could be here for 3 hours, but we're all so busy. So really quickly, let's just start with some federal budget updates. I would like to thank my colleague, Tris Carpenter, for sharing some of this information. If you haven't seen this, Tris, actually, we just posted a much more extended version of what you're going to see on LinkedIn. So really quickly, a lot of the budgets are going up. I could probably just move on from that, Joe, right? Is that good enough?
They're all up.
Yeah, they're all up with a handful of departments. But spending has increased. Discretionary budget requests have gone up. You see mostly double-digit increases across the board from an overall discretionary budget. So that bodes well for those of you in federal government contracting. Now, I know from looking at the registrant list, many of you are in the IT professional services realm. And so as it pertains to the IT budget, the overall request is also up 2.4%, which equates to a couple $2 billion in increased spending. And I'm not going to read through all of this, but that money is diversified or spread throughout many different civilian agencies. And again, for those of you in IT contracting, you know that the government has gone through an ever-evolving process of trying to modernize its technology and technology infrastructure while taking advantage of some of the latest and greatest technologies that are out there. So everything from AI, high-performance computing, robotics, it's all shifting in that direction. And also there has been an increase in spending in the Technology Modernization Fund, $500 million. And it's a very different way that the government is allocating some of its spend for IT spending, simply because agencies actually have to apply for this funding to modernize certain aspects of its technology. So all bodes well for those in the IT area. You see on this next chart, also most of an increase across most of the major departments in terms of IT spend. And then the last slide I will shows some of the breakdown between the agency, bureau, and component level that you also see an increase in spend. The one quick takeaway I want to share is that some companies will take a look at this and say, that's fantastic. We should go after every single opportunity and just diversify these other agencies. It's like, no. The big takeaway is while spending is up, you still have to stay within the core area that you focus as a company in terms of services and capabilities, but also making sure that you stay within the same realm of agencies. So if you are working within Department of Treasury, you want to probably stay within financially focused agencies. If you're in national protection, probably still want to stay within Homeland Security and Justice. So, but overall news is positive in terms of IT spend.
And Jeff, also with that, when it comes to recognizing revenue from, if you are breaking into a brand new agency, how long does that normally take?
Oh gosh, already putting me on the spot, Joe. If you're going to break into the agency, depending upon the size of the company, the capabilities you have, the people that you have on board, winning work, completely net new work in a new agency can take anywhere from 1 to 3 years. You might get lucky and get some contracting work on the outset, but it takes a significant amount of investment to try to break into new agencies. So we have a couple of quick slides on small business regulation updates. Again, because I looked at the registration list, I did see that there were several small businesses that are listening in. Some of this is new. But I would say both government and industry is still trying to come to terms in terms of how this impacts individual procurements. Joe's smiling because he's knee deep in this.
Knee deep, neck
deep. And so, although some of these regulations were updated in November of 2020, and we're a year and a half into it, I tell you, agencies are still grappling with this. So some of the basic takeaways I just want to quickly share is that these SBA regulations now say that a mentor-protege joint venture, and I also clarify that to mean small business joint venture as well, the joint venture inherits all of the experience, capabilities, systems, certifications from any of the individual members of the joint venture. While that might seem obvious to many organizations, both government and industry didn't have a clear definition of that, and agencies were interpreting it differently. So now that's set in stone in terms of the JV itself. Also, a big change is that the prior regulation only allowed for 3 awards in 2 years for joint ventures. And now they removed that 3 award restriction to mean any number of awards. Because if you think about it, if you form a joint venture, a mentor-protege joint venture, or a small business joint venture, to only be limited to 3 awards in 2 years really makes it challenging in terms of trying to decide how many programs to go after. And so with that restriction removed, once you win your first award, you are eligible to win as many awards as you can within that 2-year window. The last 2 main bullets, kind of important here, and we're kind of dealing with this right now for many of you that are small business, but if you're also a large mentor, small business mentor as well. Federal agencies can now limit the number of experience or past performance examples from the mentor company. That was never clearly spelled out in the regulations. In fact, if you read the Code of Federal Regulations, it doesn't explicitly state this, but within GAO protests now, government agencies can limit the number of mentor experience examples that companies submit if they're submitting as a mentor-protege joint venture. Very, very important, because there were some protege companies that were thinking, hey, I'm just going to form a joint venture with a mentor and just submit all their experience. Now agencies can limit that. The one caveat to this, for many companies, the one advantage you have is that there is also GAO case precedence which says that agencies can't hold proteges to the same experience requirements as a mentor or as a regular small business offer. Quick example, then I'll move on. If you're working on an RFP that asks for 3 examples, let's just say 3 past performance examples, you can't ask the protege company to submit all 3, whereas the regular small business offer has to. Anyway, I'm sure we could talk all day about small business regulations, but really what we want to do is get to the good stuff eventually. This is also takeaway, small business, first-year small business subcontractors. So this is a ruling that I'm just going to say, I hate saying prediction, but we're going to start seeing some protests on this particular regulation because it's not clearly defined. So really quickly, the takeaway. On any small business set-aside that you go after from this day forward, you have the ability to bring on what's classified as first tier. You just have to call it out. First tier small business subcontractor, and you can use the experience of those small business subs as that of your own, as that of the prime offer. The one caveat is the highlighted text at the very bottom of the slide, but that's only if that you can't independently demonstrate the capabilities and past performance yourself. So I won't go into too much more detail. If you want to learn more about this and hear our interpretation of it, please contact us, but this has far-reaching ramifications for many small business set-asides moving forward. So let's talk about some upcoming large procurements. Now, I like to think that I have the easy ones I'm going to cover. Department of State Evolved, I'm going to talk about Homeland Security PACTS III. Joe gets the one that is, I'm sure many of you are going to have questions on, GSA Polaris. So that's why we kind of left it towards the end. So first, let's talk about Department of State Evolve. For many of you expecting that Evolve was going to come out in December or January, big surprise, it's going to be delayed. So best case scenario we're going to see is probably February what's going to come out. I'll give a little bit of a history of Evolve, but first let me just quickly describe it. It's going to be a 5-year contract, $8 billion ceiling, 5 separate pools, of which one is going to be small business set aside. The other are full and open and unrestricted. And on the small business set aside, you see that it's a $35 million NAICS code. They're anticipating 6 awards per pool, hence 30 awards. Place of performance, it's worldwide, but a lot of it also within the US. And I put the final RFP expected this next quarter. We'll see if that actually sticks. Now, I know some of you are tracking Evolve. It's essentially a recompete of the Department of State Vanguard contract and other IRM, Bureau of Information Resource Management contracts. The main contract, the main Vanguard contract, was the one that SAIC held. And that's the one where they were averaging $200 million a year for the last 10 years. So kudos to SAIC for having that contract, but also a huge downside to SAIC because Department of State said, you know what, we should probably split up this contract. And the reasoning for that is they want continuous innovation. They want more creative solutions. And they feel like with a diversified pool of contractors, they can meet those objectives. So here are the 5 pools of which they designated. I'm not going to go through too much detail on these, but I do want to explain some interesting features of each of these different pools. I've included just snippets, just really a bullet each, just so you see what is intended to be competed as task orders eventually inside each of the pools. Again, with pool 3 as the small business set aside. Now with pool 1 is the, I'll call it the PMO, management consulting, architecture type pool, where the winners in this pool will be really working on the requirements and design for all of the development delivery services in the other pools. Now, if you go after pool 1, you cannot partner with any other companies in any of the other pools. And also, if you go after pools 2 through 5, you can only win a maximum of 2 total across prime or sub into the other pools. So there is some thinking involved here in terms of how you want to team, whether you go after pool 1, standalone, or you decide to go after one of the other pools. You have to kind of pick and choose. You could go after 2 through 5 as a prime if you want, if you're a small business, but you're only going to be limited to winning 2. In terms of the current evaluation approach in the draft RFP, there is going to be a go, no-go criteria. I'm going to show that on the next slide. And the phase 1 factors really focus on a technical challenge. This is not your run-of-the-mill, everyday, standard IDIQ contract response. These are fairly detailed technical challenges that will require quite a bit of thinking and technical know-how to respond to them. And then they're going to be looking at past performance and experience. Then they're going to go through an advisory down select. If you make the advisory down select, you're going to go through the phase 2 non-price factors. And I really just summarize what they look like. If you look at the draft RFP, there's a significant amount of detail in each of those particular factors. So these are the takeaways for the go, no go criteria in the phase 1 non-price factors. And by the way, if anyone has a question as to whether you're going to have this deck, yes, you can have this deck. You're going to receive a PDF version of this after the presentation. And so the reason why I share this is because of the really steep go, no go criteria. If you're planning to go after Revolve, you know, everyone requires the facilities clearance, a CMMI and or an ISO certification. Some of them even require having a location close to one of their main offices. And then you get a sense of the technical challenges that Department of State has laid out. So not your run-of-the-mill contract. If you're a traditionally large defense contractor, sure, you probably have a lot of these criteria already. For the small business pool, that's pretty steep for a lot of companies. I would envision more of the DoD contractors having some of those certifications. But for those in federal civilian, you know, this is something that, you know, could be tougher if you don't have them. So our overall take on this particular contract, this is just Red Team's interpretation, our overall strategy. We would expect between 25 to 50 proposals for the full and open pools. I would not say we're always accurate, but we're pretty much in the ballpark. You know, when we eventually talk to our friends in government, you know, this sometimes will tell us, generally speaking, how big of a pool or how many proposals they've received. We anticipate pool 4 of the unrestricted to be the most popular application services. And pool 3, we would expect, because it's a small business set aside, there's only one small business set aside out of the 5 pools, that we're probably going to see at least 100 proposals. So it's going to be very competitive, very active. Couple of other takeaways. Even though the draft RFP allows for commercial and federal past performances, based upon how the technical challenges are written, what we tell companies, what we tell clients is that if you have a limited understanding of Department of State, don't really understand how they're structured, how they go about their business, if you don't have OCONUS experience, this is going to be an uphill battle for you to address. I'm sure you're going to be able to address the technical requirements, but really what they're looking for is your ability to exceed their metrics and also a way to represent lower risk to Department of State. So if you are a company that doesn't have Department of State experience or maybe USAID experience, don't have OCONUS experience, that to Department of State could mean increased risk. A couple of other takeaways. If you are going after multiple pools as a large company, just a takeaway, don't just copy and paste some of the sections that you might see between each of the pools. I'm telling you that the government will look at that and they want to see some delineation between how you might manage your performance in each of these pools. And so I'm going to move on because we have a lot more to cover. I'm going to go over to PACTS now. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, Homeland Security PACTS contract stands for Program Management, Administrative, Clerical, and Technical Services. This is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business set-aside, a 5-year contract, 2-year base, 3 1-year options. Although from my memory, PACTS I, PACTS II will hit all 5 years. $1.5 billion ceiling, which has been the historical ceiling in PACTS I, PACTS II. What used to be 4 categories in PACTS I is now just 2 functional categories. So one is really primarily the PMO category, functional category 1, and the other functional category 2 is the office administrative, more administrative type services overall. Number of awards from PACTS II, and this award profile might change. We're looking at a little over, or there are 21 in functional category 1 and there are 18 in functional category 2. I wouldn't be surprised, Joe, I know you've worked at this as well in the past. I wouldn't be surprised if they increase that award profile a little bit. You know, over the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen just an increase in the number of service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. I do think it merits having a higher pool of contractors as well.
Agreed.
Place of performance in the U.S. Expect the final RFP sometime late this fiscal year. Again, would not be surprised if this gets pushed into fiscal year 23. So just a little bit of history of PACTS. I think this kind of sets the stage, a little bit of context for everybody that's considering this, that is an SDV as well. By the way, if you are not a service-disabled veteran, you can still team as well. So PACTS I, awarded in 2009, 25 companies won it over 4 functional categories. I often like to show this data because it gives companies some context in terms of if you win the IDIQ, what can you expect to actually get post-award? So during the peak of the original PACTS, the contract was averaging $130 million a year, which is actually pretty impressive considering it was the first iteration of this particular IDIQ. Now, the downside to that was that the top 2 companies was making up 50% of the spend. That happens sometimes. However, the top 8 companies won at least $10 million. The task orders were a little bit smaller in size. They were roughly averaging $1 to $2 million. Let's think about this contract. It's a program management administrative type contract, so you're not going to get 100 bodies. This is what the 3, 5, 10 people type of contracts. PACTS II, awarded in 2017, 35 companies, or really it was 38, to over 2 functional areas. Last 2 fiscal years, spend has gone up to over $200 million a year. And again, top 3 companies making up 50% of the spend. Now, you might look at that and say, well, that's going to be rough for us to win this contract and expect to get some spend from it. Well, top 15 companies have won at least $10 million, which is pretty impressive. Again, given the NAICS size standard, it's a $16.5 million size standard, $8 million for the functional category 2. And so if you're looking at going after this contract, just know historically, a lot of companies that have won it have performed and won. But when we look at most other IDIQs and GWACs in our market, typically what you'll see is that only 50% of the contracts that win an IDIQ might expect to see some spend. The other 50% don't get anything. PACTS is a little bit different, where you're going to expect to see some spend. So this is where it gets tricky. If you ask me a question on this later, I'm probably going to forget this slide. I mean, teaming, there were probably like 100 Q&A just on teaming alone in PACTS II. And so I'm going to go through this really quickly. So you're allowed joint ventures, you're allowed to prime and sub. For prime and sub, if you are a sub, you also have to be small. So for those of you that are large companies looking to go after this, the only way you'd be able to have some skin in the game here is if you go after as a mentor protege joint venture. But there are limitations on being able to prime and sub. So essentially, a quick way of saying it is that you can't really cross team within a functional category. So primes in functional category 1 can't be subs in functional category 2 or 1, and same with functional category 2. And then there's restrictions between functional categories 1 and 2 as well. And there were very, very few winners that won both functional categories. So you might say you could still go after both, but the likelihood of you winning both, just based on historical precedents, is going to be slim. So look at where you are as a company, what services you offer. Is it really programmatic in nature, or is it more administrative in nature? And then make that decision in terms of which way to go. In terms of the requirements, this is a heavy, or was a heavy, past performance and experience related contract. Minimum 5 up to 7. Management was a large part of the response, program manager. And I remember this from PACTS 1 and 2. Although they didn't overemphasize it, your program manager, having had some DHS experience, is going to be key here. And so those were the requirements from PACTS 2. We'll see if they replicate it for PACTS 3. And then just final take on PACTS 3. As of January 20th, within the last week, DHS has confirmed that they will compete PACTS 3. And that seems silly for me to even say that, given that we're talking about it. But for those of you that do business at Homeland Security, just know that they've allocated a lot of their spend away from their own IDIQs. They've stopped competing some of their IDIQs and have opted for what they call best-in-class contracts, which are really the GWACs. So just know, whether you go after PACTS or not, DHS has diversified their spend across a lot of different contract vehicles, whether that is OASIS, GSA schedule, as well as PACTS. Also know that, again, as I said, a lot of these task orders are smaller in nature. I do expect DHS to deploy a 2-phase down select in this, as they've done in the past as well. So keep your eye on this one. Hopefully DHS releases a draft RFP. And with that, Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about everyone's favorite GWAC, really, of the last year. So go ahead, take it away, Joe.
Okay. So, yeah, we've been mentioning some acronyms here. So GWAC is a government-wide acquisition contract. What Jeff has just been talking about is 2 agencies specific, what we call IDIQs, or indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. This is Polaris from the General Services Administration. It is the replacement for Alliant Small Business. There was an Alliant 2 small business that was competed, but never awarded. It was protested, and this is its replacement. To give some context, in its best year, GSA Alliant garnered over $1.3 billion across all federal agencies in spend, and that was in 2017. So this is a very, very important vehicle. And also a big difference between this and the previous 2 opportunities we talked about is this is a scoring proposal, whereas the other ones have a very traditional written element in terms of a technical solution, a past performance solution, and a whole bunch of other areas. This is based on a scoring template. And we're beginning to see some of these very large best-in-class contracts that go to this because they get so many proposals, and it's a more binary evaluation approach, but it does create some complexities for how you go after it. So the size standard for this will be a $30 million in annual receipts. There are going to be, they have announced the number of awards through some draft RFPs that came out in 2021. There's going to be 100 small business, 60 hub zone, 70 SDVOSB, and approximately 80 woman-owned small businesses that will get awards. At the end of the year last year, they announced that they were going to split this procurement up. So small business and women-owned small business will be competed very soon. We've heard February. It was supposed to be January. Now it's moved into February for a release of this. And then the final RFP for the hub zone and SCVOSB will be competed later this year. We're not sure of exact timing on that, but we're assuming that they want to get into the evaluation of the first to get into the second. Next slide. So in terms of the differences between Alliant to small business that was competed and not awarded, there are some areas that have been taken out, and there is no price submission required with this. This is only going to, rates will be determined at the task order level, but not at the IDIQ level or the GWAC level. And now a cybersecurity and SCRM assessment are both required as a part of this submission. And then next, these are the performance areas, and the performance areas are going to be, you can see that there's probably a lot of small businesses that covers these areas, but the way the scoring is going to be determined is through North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS codes. That is what is going to determine whether you have done this work or not. You have the ability to potentially prove that you've done this work, but you're going to have customer acknowledgement and signatures to prove that if you don't have the NAICS codes that relate to some of these areas. And then there's also an emerging technology component, and we're seeing this flavor of emerging technology through multiple contracts right now. We've seen something similar with NITEX or NIH's CIOSV4 contract that was competed last summer, and it has very similar elements here. Now, getting into the score sheet, this is, we're going to walk you through all of the scoring elements. But as you can see right here, there's 5 relevant experience projects. You get the most points if you cover all 5 of the areas of the slide that I covered two areas back, or 2 slides back. Automatically, if you give 5, you get 17,250 points. So regardless of the size of the opportunity, you automatically get a very large number of points. Next, it now becomes important how large your opportunities are. So for small businesses that are going after this, it's going to be very important to start to look at this in a lot of different ways to see how high you can get on your point scoring. Because the way that you win this contract is the points that you garner. There will be a cutoff, and anybody below, any bidders that are below a certain threshold, which is not going to be announced, will not get awards. Next, they're also looking for demonstrated working with multiple federal customers. So there are some, if you have multiple federal customers, you get more points. If you only have one, you only get 500 points. And then cost reimbursement is there. Next slide. We're just going to quickly go through the.
And just really quickly, I think where it says project with value greater than 10 million, I think that's supposed to be 15 million, just to show that the clear cutoffs between them. So.
And then this is where as I mentioned earlier on, they've got a cybersecurity area, they've got OCONUS, and they've got task order against a multiple award federal contract. And that is, all of those areas get you even more points from that original area. And they're all based on those only 5 unique experiences. All of these points are based on that same area. Now, next, this is where back one, Jeff, sorry. Down here, this is where the NAICS codes, if you cover all 5 of the NAICS codes, then you get up to 8,000 more points. So that's a very important number that you have to try to head to. And you're probably wondering if you're a small business, you're saying, can I team? Can I get that? There is the ability to team, but we're going to get to a very important final scoring element that we'll talk about a little bit deeper. And so relevant experience projects in emerging technology. You see here, emerging technologies is very talked about in the statement of work, but it's only a total of 4,000 overall points that you can get out of those. And then you have some final scoring elements, which are past performance, and then purchasing systems that have been approved. And then we have some certifications, probably next. CMMI, ISO, and then secret and top secret also get you additional points. But as you can see here, 750 to 2250, the numbers are going down here. And then finally, these two are very important. First, organizational risk assessment. I was talking about teaming just a second ago. Teaming it is allowed. It is allowed for joint ventures. It is allowed for small business subcontractors, and it is allowed for inter-protege joint ventures. However, this is a big however, you only get this 8,500 points, which if you notice, the total possible points for a small business is 91,000, and then 100,000 for SDVOSBs and the other socioeconomic categories. You only get this 8,500 points if you can demonstrate that you have worked previously together. So that 8,500 points is only given to you. It's not a penalty. It's a reward if you have worked together previously. Next is the limitations on subcontract and compliance risk. And that is the next element, which is you have to show that you are all of the same socioeconomic category, or 3 of the experience examples has to come from that socioeconomic category that you're bidding for. And this 8,500 points are only available to those bidders that are in the hub zone, SDVOSB, and women-owned small business. Next slide. So organizational risk, very important. If you notice, 8,500 points, it's 17,000 points on those last 2 areas out of 100,000 points. That is very important. If you cannot get those points, it's going to be very hard for you to win this contract. So teaming, they are putting an emphasis on having worked together rather than forming a team just to go after this. Size and diversification experience and projects along NAICS codes is just as important, and that's a 25% of the overall score is on those relevant experience areas. Emerging technology, while it's talked about a lot, is only for 4% of the overall points. This is our take, as Jeff was saying about the other one. This is where we think you need to be at. But on a hub zone, on the socioeconomic categories, we believe you're going to have to score between 85,000 and 90,000 points. And for the small business minimum scoring, we believe you're going to have to be between 78,000 and 82,000. And that's just if you're bidding in the only small business category. I know it seems inverse for the socioeconomic categories to have a higher number of points. We get this question all the time. However, there's 8,500 points that are only available to those socioeconomic categories. And if you're bidding on this, we really like to say your relevant experience and projects are greater than 10 million. You've got to start to look at everything that you have. If you're going after this, probably you should have looked at this already. The score sheet's been out for a bit, and really start to examine all the different permutations that you could bid as with all of your partners, people that you've worked with before, or companies that you've worked with before, and figure out exactly how to maximize those points. The General Services Administration really hasn't spoken publicly about this since around November of last year. We know that the release is imminent, but we're looking to see if there's any changes to the score sheet. But a lot of people ask us, and they've compared this to the contract from last year, CIOSB 4, and they're expecting changes to occur the same way that that contract changed or evolved through the entire final RFP process. We don't expect to see too many changes here. So what you have right now is pretty solid in terms of going after it. There might be a few small changes here and there, but there's probably not going to be the same level of changes that we saw from NITEC.
All right. So in the next 3 minutes, cover all of these other big contracts coming out. Let's see if you can do this in 3 minutes.
Okay, quickly, I'm just going to look at my email very quickly as I'm saying this, just to see if anything has popped out. Nothing has popped out. So CISP4, there is an amendment that came out on that, and there is a new submission that is due on Friday of this week. We can say that we've heard that there's been a few challenges with the new Insight tool, and it takes some time to upload all of your information. It's probably what I'll say publicly. And so earlier is better than later if you are resubmitting on this contract. CATS, that is a commerce activity, and that is actually, we have been waiting for answers to questions since around early December, and on a weekly basis that's been extended in terms of when to expect those. So that's probably going to be it's a two-phase response. They have to answer questions first. Once they answer questions, then the first phase goes in, and then there will be a second phase that's completed. We see that happening very shortly. There's 2 ongoing product IDIQs, and there's a lot of money tied up in these product IDIQs, and a lot is spent on these over the years. DHS First Source 3, as well as Army ITES 4H. DHS First Source 3, there was a 2-phased approach. First phase went in last summer. We are still waiting to see who moves to the second phase. Army ITES 4H came out last summer. There are questions into the government that have not been answered. It has been extended all the way till March for final submission, but there are no answers to questions yet. The other 2 big contracts that are GWACs and best-in-class contracts that are coming up is later on this year or early next year, there will be a GSA Services MAC. If you've heard of OASIS, this is the follow-on to OASIS. Additionally, another product contract called NASA SOUP 6. You'll hear us talk about that probably in the coming year. And that is one of the premier vehicles for products across the entire federal government. And then there's also the Avail Veteran Affairs opportunity that'll be coming out in the next year or so. Is that quick enough, Jack?
Yeah. With that, certainly Joe and I are open to questions. What I want to do is turn it back to the Pinnacle team for any other thoughts. Again, Q&A, if you have any questions, anything we presented so far, the opportunities, small business regulations, then I certainly welcome the information. And you have our contact information here as well, in case you did not want to ask the question in public forum. And so Carolyne, Masha, and team, Lauren, anything else before I stop sharing and turn it back to you all?
It's Carolyne Pelton. Yes, I know we had a couple of questions come in via email, and we'll ask Masha and Lauren to lead that.
Great, Lauren, I'll start. Jeff, within your introduction, you mentioned that you assist smaller companies compete against their bigger competitors. Obviously, everything that you covered and Joe covered speaks to that, but there is anything sort of best practices for a company that has graduated from small business or outgrew their small business, graduated from 8A, and now looking to grow through acquiring new contracts? How do they compete effectively against larger competitors?
A great question. It's almost like we should think ahead of another webinar to really dive deep on that. There's a lot of best practices there. Whether you're a $10 million a year company that's going after a $25 million a year company, or if you're a recently graduated small business, let's say you're a $30 or $40 million company that's competing against the traditional bigs, it really does come down to focusing on your core competencies and making smart decisions in terms of the types of contracts you're going after. the quickest way to ensure that you remain flat as an organization or you shrink is to try a shotgun approach. So companies have to be smart and diligent about how they diversify into other agencies. And oftentimes what we tell companies is you have to leverage your relationships. The government contracting market, whether state or federal, is based upon relationships today. So if you're planning to break into new accounts or agencies and you don't know anybody, you don't know any teaming partners there, don't know any of the decision makers, well, that's where you need to start before you just start going on bidding different contracts. And so that holds true, again, whether you're a $50 million company that's trying to go after Lockheed. We've seen it done. We've helped companies that size beat the large defense contractors. But it's, again, focusing on the core and making smart decisions on leveraging your strengths versus trying to go after everything.
Thank you.
Jeff and Joe, another question. And Joe, you had asked Jeff sort of, how much time can you expect to build in the process when you're trying to win work in a new agency? But even stepping back before that, what advice would you have for our callers that, how early, I guess, should they be starting to track procurement so that they can really be best positioned to have a successful submission?
So Joe, I'll probably have you answer this. Joe runs our overall capture, and so I'm gonna tee it up a little bit. We're in this position where where we help hundreds of companies every year, and we would love all of our clients to be in front of the opportunity, a year, 2 years in front. But we're also realistic and pragmatic. We're all so busy, and everything looks good in terms of the program. So pipelines become a little unwieldy. And so companies will spend time and effort going after one set of opportunities, forget going and capturing the others. The RFP drops and they say, well, we should go after as well. So there's no one right answer in terms of timing. We have identified best practices there, but Joe, I'll let you kind of chime in here in terms of timing and making those decisions in terms of preparation.
Well, it's interesting because the opportunities that we've looked at today, there's one that is a very large vehicle that covers the entire federal government and allows you a very quick and easy way for the government to buy from you, regardless of the agency. Whereas there's two others that we talked about that are agency specific. So obviously, to Jeff's points earlier on about getting to know your agencies, those, in some cases, you're going to find out about, if you know your agencies, you're going to find out about opportunities before they are quote unquote publicly available. And in those cases, that's going to be areas that you need to be in there. And that is a best practice for going after agency business. However, on these very, very large vehicles, you can basically see that, let's call it, if CIOSP4 was awarded tomorrow, that's a 10-year contract. So 10 years from now, 2032, wow, there will be another award. And so if you backtrack that, and if you assume that there's going to be at least a year runway or a year and a half runway, in 2030, you start looking at, okay, we need to go after CIOSP5 as quickly as we have to figure out our strategy for that. And then you start looking back at CIOSP4 and say, okay, how did they go after this? What are the minimum requirements? Do we have to have a CMMI certification? Do we have the right makeup to be a good small business or open market bidder on this? So these very large vehicles are very important for companies to have, especially if you're being evaluated or if you're looking to sell. These large vehicles are very, very valuable. And so there's almost two pockets that you look at. So for tactical task area responses, there's probably 6 months to a year that you need to be in front of. For the large billion-dollar IDIQs or GWACs, you're looking at a longer runway that requires some investment, because usually what you're investing in those 2 years out is getting CMMI or ISO or and these processes take some time. It's not going to be something where you just pay X amount of money and get a certification. You have to come up with processes, be evaluated, be accredited, and do a whole bunch of areas just to get that accreditation.
And I just have a quick comment I want to tack on to what Joe was saying, and I'm just going to caveat this answer with Pinnacle did not pay me to say this, but one thing that any company going after a lot of these single award task orders is you should actually let your banker know if you're anticipating the award, right? So if you're within, weeks, it really should be months. If you feel like you're in a good position, contact your banker, let them know, give them a heads up, call Pinnacle, let them know, because we've actually seen scenarios where you win these contracts, 20, 30, 40, $50 million, and getting that extended credit line to actually pay your staff is too late. And so it's like the best day and worst day in your life that just happened, that you won this contract. Oh, wait, we don't have the sufficient credit lines to actually pay it because, government can be behind in their payments. And so it's like a small little detail that we'll want to make sure, especially for small businesses that go after these contracts, contact your bank and let them know which programs and for selection might actually get awarded. So, and again,
there's usually 30 to 60 day transitions that you have to do and potentially hire 100 people within those 30, 60 days.
That's right.
I couldn't have said that better myself, Jeff and Joe. I appreciate that. We appreciate that. That's a great way to end, folks. Pinnacle is a terrific institution, and if you can't tell, our team is thrilled to be here. Lauren, Masha, and I thank the Red Team first off for their participation today. We thank each of you for joining, and for all of the many people at Pinnacle who helped us pull this together today. We thank you as well. We are here to be supportive of your companies. We love your space. We support your space. And we couldn't be more thrilled to engage with you in the coming weeks and months and years. So we hope that you will be in touch. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and stay warm.